So today we're so thrilled to have for our COBRA webinar a series of speakers from the Ocean Discovery League talking to us about monitoring and evaluating deep sea capacity development initiatives. Joining us today are Katy Croft-Bell, the founder and president of Ocean Discovery League, Susan Poulton, the vice president of strategy and communications for ODL, and Nadiah Rosli from working in capacity development as the program manager for that project. So thank you all for joining us. And I will stop sharing so that you can take over from here. Thanks.
Thanks, Beth. Um, Oops, that is not what we want here. The agenda for the day. Here we go. How's that?
That looks great. Thanks, Katy.
Excellent. Thank you, Beth, so much for having us. And Nadiah is unfortunately not here with us. She lives in Malaysia, so her section of the presentation is recorded, just to give you a heads up on that. So as you probably well know, we've only seen a very minuscule fraction of the deep sea floor, mostly due to our historically inefficient in terms of operations, very expensive, and really inequitable approach to deep sea exploration and research. And this lack of data results in a very limited understanding of the deep benthos and its ecosystems. So the purpose of the Ocean Discovery League is to look at how we can change this approach to accelerate deep sea exploration and research, really by developing more accessible systems and to broaden the community of those who can explore and understand the deep sea. So our approach is sort of threefold. And the first area that we're working in is targeted exploration. So this is focusing on approaching global deep sea exploration in a more representative and unbiased way than has been done before. And we should be having a paper coming out in coming weeks that really lays out the history over the past 70 years of where we've done this kind of work. The second is developing low cost and easy to use data collection and analysis systems to increase the efficiency and really reduce the barriers to the technologies required for exploration and research. And third, we're working to broaden the community of deep sea explorers through education and training. And that's really what this talk today is focused on, this third area of broadening the community and how we can move that forward and ensure that we're able to do it in a really responsible and effective way. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan to talk about this overview of monitoring and evaluation.
Thanks, Katy. So yeah, we're excited to present this work to all of you because it's a pilot program that we've been developing. It's a bit of sort of a side initiative that Ocean Discovery League created. And Katy's going to go a little bit into the process for how we got here. But monitoring and evaluation is challenging even in, especially for programs in science. It's tough to do, and it's challenging even if you have a framework for how to do it. And as we got into more capacity development work, which is, building capacity in target environments and in target countries, it became clear that there wasn't necessarily a framework to do that. So this is how this whole project sort of came to be, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we got here. But I do want to emphasize this is a pilot, so we're really looking for feedback. This is our first time. We've presented it and, kind of co-developed this with the community, but now we're really kind of launching it onto the world. And so we're really looking for feedback from folks about how this is coming to be. Next slide, Katy. So, as I mentioned, M&E is important. It's really critical to record and measure and compare the outcomes of the initiatives that we're doing. So, and especially when you're doing, you're building capacity, it can be really hard to, set benchmarks, set guidelines to know if anything that you're doing, is being effective. It can happen. It can, require a lot of time for capacity to be built. It's not something where you just kind of do a one and done and you put a survey out and you're like, success. It's something that you really have to measure the impact of and the effectiveness over time. And so we were really grateful that this work was really done. You'll hear from Nadiah, who pre-recorded her section of this presentation. We were really grateful that our team came forward to us and said, "Hey, this is important, and we should, give it a go and see if we can develop a framework for this." But it's really key that it need to be simple and feasible, and that it prioritize the local stakeholder ownership. So we didn't want to do this in a vacuum. We didn't want to kind of come to that community from the outside and say, "Here's how you should evaluate your programming." It really needs to be co-developed, and it really needs to be embraced by the organizations that are taking it on. Next slide. So, this was really new work for me, at least, and I think it was for Katy too when our team brought this to us. But there's a lot of new approaches in monitoring and evaluating programs. So hybrid, multidimensional evaluation methods can really be applied to capture a program success or failure. So that's what you're going to see as far as the recommendations that we put forward for how to, employ a maturity model, which is the phrase we use, and we'll go into the definition of that. But really, it's about assessing those long-term impacts. So what we're really hoping is that we can co-develop this with the deep ocean community, and it can become a standard and a framework for how we can even compare different programs and programs across different initiatives to see which ones are having long-term impacts, and then we can adopt the ones that are being successful. Whatever they're doing, we want to be able to adopt their success. Next slide. So as Katy mentioned, we have a real challenge in the deep sea community right now. Deep sea exploration is limited pretty much to high income regions just because of the expense of getting that research done. And low income and middle income regions often just lack access to deep sea tools and training. Next slide. So in 2022, ODL conducted the Global Deep Sea Capacity Assessment. There's a link here, but it's also on our website, which was a baseline assessment of the technical and human capacity for deep sea exploration in every coastal area with deep ocean worldwide. And yeah, Katy's putting a link in the chat to it. And do check it out. It was fairly extensive. It documented what I think a lot of people in the deep ocean community know, but we were the first to really dig in and document it. And we found a lot of really interesting discoveries in the data, 3 of which are here. We learned that in many places there's expertise, but not technology. That was a surprise. We also learned that deep sea vehicle access to activate that expertise was huge. So it was really about, part of it was about, needing training. So training being a critical opportunity, but a lot of it was just about access to the tools and access to deployment and the ability to even, conduct the research. And this was kind of our first foray into really understanding what the global capacity for doing deep ocean research was. Next slide, Katy. So what we also found, and since ODL has been starting doing deep sea capacity development work, that there are a lot of organizations that are really, doing this, and it's really kind of taken off in the last 2 or 3 years. I think 3, 4 years ago, people were like, and now you hear this capacity development, and you hear this, wanting to build a global exploration community for the deep ocean. You just start hearing that more, but the more we heard that these programs were being developed, the more we realized that there needed to be a framework for evaluating them. So as we're all launching into doing capacity programs, really stepping back to make sure that we're measuring from the very beginning those outcomes. And that's actually what inspired us to do the capacity assessment, was that baseline. as soon as we started launching into this, we're like, well, how do we know if we've changed the global capacity if we don't measure it before we start? So we immediately sort of launched the 2022 capacity assessment to really set the benchmark so that we could even quantitatively over time measure. And we learned a lot from that initiative and what we, how to do it differently in subsequent ones. But we really did go, okay, wait, we need to measure where we are now so we can actually begin to see if we're making a difference over the next, 5 or 10 years. Next slide. So about the same year that we did the capacity assessment, a paper was published that found that this statement from the paper: currently, capacity development in ocean science has yet to have an effective, transferable, and repeatable monitoring standard. And so the paper really identified the challenge of ensuring that capacity development initiatives in ocean science are trackable, that they're comparable from year over year, that they're comparable between organizations, that they're measurable. And it also emphasized the need for spaces where stakeholders, scientists, anyone involved in the capacity development process could openly discuss their experiences. And so that kind of prompted us to create this maturity model that you're going to hear about and start to create that framework and also start to create that space so that everyone could share what their experiences were. So I'm going to hand it over to Katy, who's going to take you through a little bit of the process, and then you'll hear from Nadiah about the actual process.
Fantastic. Thanks, Susan. So then once we decided that there was this gap in the community that needed to be filled, we did a lot of research. A lot of background research on capacity and training programs, both within the deep sea community and in other, mostly environmental communities. And really what we wanted to do is create something for individuals and organizations to understand their current capacity development status and identify next steps. So working with program coordinators that didn't necessarily have a lot of experience with monitoring and evaluation. And as Susan said at the beginning, this was new to she and I, but it wasn't to our capacity and community program managers who brought this to us. And we're so glad that they did. So the idea was, how can we make this more accessible, more available to the community, which is sort of a common theme within ODL. After that background research, we identified several organizations to interview. So conducted interviews with at least 7 organizations, including COBRA, Deuce, many others. And we've also run workshops at the Deuce annual meeting for the last few years to gather thoughts and feedback about capacity development from the community. And our goal here was really to understand different perspectives on monitoring and evaluation, existing frameworks and best practices, as well as gaps and challenges to implementing monitoring and evaluation capacity development programs. After all the research, the interviews, we worked with a monitoring and evaluation specialist, Carlisa Callwood, to develop this maturity model for capacity development initiatives in the deep sea community. And we also worked with reviewers from South Africa and Montserrat, Zolika Philander and Vita Wade, to help fine tune the first version of this maturity model and process. Throughout that initial version 1, ODL also conducted 3 webinars to introduce the maturity model to the community, and specifically program coordinators involved in capacity development. And again, also presented it at the Deuce annual meeting last year. So the coordinators who came to those webinars were invited to test the first version of the model on their programs and provide detailed feedback. And then that feedback was incorporated into version 2 of the model, which is where we are today. So right now we're in Q1 of 2025, and we're making version 2 of the maturity model available to the community. It is online on our website, and I think we'll share that in a little bit. And as Susan said previously, we're very interested in your feedback, which is absolutely critical in making this tool truly valuable for the deep sea community at large. So one of the biggest areas that we were working on was really, what is the definition of capacity development for the deep sea? And this is the sort of essence of the work that we did. I'm not going to read this to you, but I can take a moment to let everybody read it for themselves. So it is long, but it is thorough and really takes into account all of the feedback, the workshops, the reviews, the revisions with many, many participants, practitioners, and reviewers from across the community. And it really identifies common themes and points raised from all of these sources and highlights the significance of the two-way exchange of ideas. It's not just a dumping of information from one group to another, but rather allows communities to share their knowledge and perspectives with each other while gaining external expertise and resources. Similarly, other terms I'm sure everybody's heard, like knowledge exchange and capacity sharing, really get to this heart of collaborative and mutually beneficial approach. Now, from this definition, we derive the 6 components of the maturity model, which we've been saying a lot, and Nadiah is going to tell you really the nuts and bolts of that. But I want to give you a little bit of the definitions of the 6 different components that are included in it. So on the right side, you can see in the darker teal are the 3 non-negotiable components. These are components of a program that really must be included within a program or initiative. So the first is community-centered ethos, which ensures that communities impacted by or connected to deep sea research are meaningfully involved in shaping the activities. Second is cultivating local talent and leadership, which focuses on developing the skills and leadership of local researchers through mentorship, training, and access to resources. And finally, long-term impact and sustainability. Like Susan said, this can't just be a one and done. We did a workshop and then we left and then we hope that somebody is successful. We really need, and we really heard for the past several years, this dedication to long-term impact and sustainability is really critical for creating enduring benefits beyond the program's timeline. On the left, in the lighter teal, are the 3 adaptive components. So these are sort of negotiable, I guess, but they really offer opportunities to further strengthen your initiatives based on specific needs and goals of the program or the community with which you're working. So building equitable research partnerships really promotes equitable collaboration by strengthening local research systems, infrastructure, and access. Amplification of research enhances the visibility and impact of deep sea research through effective communication, dissemination, and community engagement. And finally, competency leads to adaptability. And this is where we're developing interdisciplinary and flexible skill sets for researchers to navigate evolving challenges, because as we well know, things tend to change. So these are the 6 core components that Nadiah is sort of going to talk about, but not really in depth. So I wanted to introduce those to you before I turn it over to Nadiah with the overview of the maturity model. Oop.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nadiah Rosli, the Capacity Development Program Manager with Ocean Discovery League. In this section, I will guide you through the practical implementation of the maturity model. I apologize for not being able to be joining you live to answer your questions in real time as I am based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but I've pre-recorded this presentation to explain the model's key components and provide a step-by-step guide for its application. So a maturity model is a resource to help organizations assess their capacity development projects and provide a clear roadmap for improvement. This model specifically emphasizes assessing and enhancing capacity development, addressing a gap we identified in existing monitoring and evaluation or M&E resources. Unlike broader M&E approaches, this model provides targeted guidance for this specific area. And while traditional M&E often concentrates on measuring outcomes, this model offers a clear roadmap for improvement. It extends beyond measurement to help organizations identify their current strengths and weaknesses and outline concrete steps to enhance their capacity development initiatives. And when used alongside a monitoring and evaluation framework, it can help an organization set realistic goals and measure achievements against benchmark. And it facilitates continuous learning, adaptation, and improvement throughout the program cycle. So the reason we chose this framework for the maturity model over other monitoring and evaluation approaches is firstly that the maturity model has a targeted focus on capacity development, unlike broader M&E approaches. And this ensures that assessments directly connect to project objectives and focus on critical success factors. And secondly, it provides a roadmap for improvement, enabling organizations to understand their strengths and weaknesses and design actionable steps to improve capacity development and avoid repeating past mistakes in program design and implementation. The maturity model is also designed for flexibility and adaptability for diverse organizational contexts and program objectives. And this is essential in the evolving field of deep sea research, where a rigid one-size-fits-all approach is often ineffective. Additionally, historically, some initiatives have failed to deliver lasting benefits to local communities, raising concerns about external organizations prioritizing short-term gains over sustainable outcomes. The maturity model promotes self-reflection and learning from past initiatives and is designed as a tool for you to not just have a one-time assessment, but also to foster a culture of capacity development within the deep sea sector, and that to ensure initiatives are not just effective in the short term, but also to contribute to long-term growth and sustainability, and ensure that intended impacts of capacity development programs are well thought out and meaningful. This also supports ODL's broader mission to promote equitable and inclusive deep sea research. So the maturity model is intended for 3 target users. The first one, which is capacity developers. These are the organizations and individuals providing expertise and support, and they have skills and knowledge in deep sea research and ocean science, including planning, managing, and evaluating capacity development projects. The second target user would be the representatives from communities impacted by or participating in capacity development initiatives. And we hope that this model will encourage a two-way feedback loop when utilized by other stakeholders, and that there is collaborative effort to the development of more inclusive and responsive initiatives that meet the deep sea community's needs. The third target users would be external stakeholders, comprising funders, resource providers, and advocates of capacity development initiatives. And version 2 of the maturity model is still under development and will be further refined based on the community's feedback. So we encourage everyone who finds this resource useful to utilize it and share your thoughts, and also to indicate which of these groups you belong to in terms of utilizing the capacity development maturity model. And next, I will go through a bit of the thought process behind the design of the maturity model as we co-developed this with Carlisa Calwood, who is a monitoring and evaluation consultant. She previously worked on a maturity model, and the case study will be about how her work has been utilized since its launch. So Carlisa was part of the Museums and Race Steering Committee, which has previously gone through a similar process to develop a maturity model. Their model takes the form of a report card, which came about from museum professionals asking how they can get their museums to start thinking critically about issues relating to equity and inclusion. They took the initial information and created a maturity model tool that would allow organizations to proactively reflect on and name where they are in their work, as well as to identify the work they still needed to do. And their goal here was to start to create acknowledgement as well as accountability for engaging in this work while providing a tool that helped them to assess and benchmark their progress towards addressing these issues. They debuted the report card in 2018, and after sharing it at several conferences, workshops, and other convenings over the past few years, they've also moved through several iterations based on feedback from both individuals as well as organizations who've utilized it. So the report card presents 6 dimensions that organizations can examine to evaluate the progress in this work. These include governance, funding, representation, responsiveness, resources, and transparency. It asks that the organizations grade themselves on the work being done currently and in the past year, and then set a goal for where they'd like to be within the next year. They frame the maturity model as a grading system, as this is a concept that most people are familiar with. In terms of the grading system of the maturity model, an F indicates that a museum is not making any effort towards equity work or is in denial about their lack of efforts. On the other hand, an A signifies that a museum is in a transformation stage where diversity and equity efforts are fully integrated into their institutional fabric, and they continue to assess these efforts regularly for sustainability in an ever-changing environment. Their intention with this particular maturity model was to be provocative and to highlight that if equity work is not being done intentionally, the organization is quote unquote failing. The maturity model can be used to evaluate perceptions of current progress at a museum or for individuals at any level in the organization to self-assess their areas of work and advance their planning or operational goals within an equity context. The snapshot obtained using the maturity model not only identified gaps in the work, but also allows the users to create an action plan for addressing those gaps. It also serves as a baseline data against which a museum can then measure and evaluate its progress over time. They also hope that the report card could stimulate conversations and self-reflection that assist museum staff and leadership in advancing their institutional equity goals, thus fostering a greater understanding of how different areas of the organization align and contribute to these efforts. Ultimately, the report card is not just a one-time assessment, but a practical tool designed to be revisited regularly. It allows them to assess progress, identify areas for improvement, and push the organization toward meaningful change. For ODL's capacity development maturity model, it is a versatile tool that can be used at any stage of a program, whether you are planning, implementing, or evaluating the program. It's helpful not only for those actively managing programs, but also for planning new initiatives or assessing the effectiveness of past ones. So when implemented in the planning phase, a maturity model can help identify a clear roadmap and define what constitutes an effective intervention. And it also helps you understand current barriers that could hinder the effectiveness of your program. If used during the implementation phase, then it can help you to determine short-term changes to enhance program outcomes. And finally, if you use the maturity model once the program has ended, it can help identify learning outcomes and formulate a plan of action for the next phase. So regardless of your current phase, the model remains relevant as it sheds a light on areas needing improvement and facilitates the implementation of either immediate or more broader long-term changes. Our maturity model has taken the capacity development definition and framed it along a maturity continuum. This provides a structured approach for coordinators and organizations to gauge their program's current level of maturity. The 6 components that make up the definition are broken down into 3 levels: initial, intermediate, and advanced. Each component is then rated on a scale from initial to advanced, indicating the degree to which your program incorporates essential elements. So the advanced level is where your program fully embodies the component, demonstrating a high degree of integration and effectiveness. At intermediate level, your program shows progress towards the advanced level with some elements in place, but areas that require improvement. And at initial level, your program is in the early stages of addressing the component with key elements missing or underdeveloped. Of the 6 components defined by the capacity development definition, these are split into 2 different types. Here, we categorize components as non-negotiable. They are considered the gold standard for deep sea research and exploration and include the community-centered ethos, cultivating local talent and leadership, and long-term impact and sustainability. These are fundamental to ensuring ethical and effective practices, addressing potential past mistakes, and prioritizing building trust and long-term collaboration with communities. The adaptive components allow for flexibility to adjust to different program objectives and local priorities. So this is the second category, and these include building equitable research partnerships, amplification of research, and competency leads to adaptability. Here you can see a zoomed out version of our maturity model that we've used as an example. You can see the 6 components down the left-hand side, starting with the non-negotiable and followed by the adaptive category. Each component is split into 3 levels: initial, intermediate, and advanced. And if we take a closer look at the first non-negotiable category, the community-centered ethos, you can see that community-centered ethos stands for the vital role of communities directly impacted by or with a vested interest in deep sea research and exploration. It ensures that these communities are actively involved in shaping scientific activities, that their values are respected, and that research benefits are shared equitably. Again, for the sake of this example, we've cut this down, where a full description of this category is found in the maturity model document. As I mentioned earlier, the model has been designed in such a way where each level builds off the previous one, providing clarity on the incremental steps necessary for progression. In the case of this example, we can see the progression in the component of dialogue across the levels, where the initial level is described as the program has been designed by consulting the community in a one-way dialogue. You may find that as you're reflecting on your initiative that it falls across level, and this is normal. This model isn't intended to be a rigid or strict checklist, but rather to act as a tool to highlight where your initiative currently stands. So how do we put all of this together? So step 1 is to review the non-negotiable components. And you can start by reviewing all 3 components in the non-negotiable category, which are community-centered ethos, cultivating local talent and leadership, and long-term impact and sustainability. These are fundamental and should be incorporated into every program. Step 2 is to select at least one adaptive component, and the components in this category are building equitable research partnerships, amplification of research, and competency leads to adaptability. Step 3 is to familiarize yourself with the level descriptions, and this is to understand the key characteristics of each maturity level, which are the initial, intermediate, and advanced levels for your chosen components. And step 4 is to reflect and conduct a self-assessment. So before starting the self-assessment, you can take a moment to reflect on your program using the reflective questions, which are in the document. And these questions will help you think critically about your program's purpose, context, assumptions, and long-term goals. And you can consider questions such as, what is the overall goal of your program? Who are the key stakeholders and how are they involved? What are the potential long-term impacts of your program? And also to reflect on your initiatives, activities, and achievements within each of your chosen components. And it's perfectly normal for your initiative to span multiple levels within a component. And just to remind as well, again, that this isn't supposed to be a rigid checklist, and it's more for you to understand and identify areas for potential growth. Step 5 is to facilitate conversations and develop an action plan. So you can use the self-assessment results to start a conversation with your team and leadership about the following. So what are our key strengths in capacity development? What are the areas where we have the greatest opportunity for growth? And how can different departments contribute more effectively to our overall capacity development goals? And keeping these insights in mind, you can proceed to develop an action plan with specific steps to improve. It could be to strengthen your action plan, and you can maybe redevelop or revisit to develop or revisit your program's theory of change or logic model. This is something that Susan will elaborate later on if you have never used a theory of change before, but it can identify specific actions to help you progress to the next level in the maturity model. And you can also use it to define key milestones and metrics or indicators to track your progress. And another thing that you can do for this step is to explore providing additional training to team members or modifying your approach to specific activities. And step 6 is the implementation phase, and this will help you achieve measurable results from your action plan. And for this, we recommend these key actions: to assign key responsibilities, allocate resources, and establish clear timelines for each task; to regularly monitor and implement your action plan, noting any deviations and proactively addressing any obstacles that arise; to maintain open communication with stakeholders by providing progress updates and encouraging collaboration to ensure successful implementation; and to document the actions taken and any adjustments made to your plan and the results achieved to inform future assessments. And the last step is to revisit and reassess. So you can revisit the maturity model regularly to monitor your progress. As you implement changes, you can reassess your maturity level as well. This will help you adjust your strategies and measure your impact. And what regular reassessments do is to help ensure your capacity development initiatives contribute to achieving your long-term goals for deep sea research and exploration. And although this whole step-by-step looks like a linear process, we would like to encourage you to see it more as an iterative one, where you can come back to it once you've implemented changes to see where your initiative now stands. Thank you. I would now like to hand over to Susan for the theory of change discussion.
Thanks. Recorded Nadiah. So I just wanted to reiterate that of the steps that Nadiah outlined, we're actually putting ODL's own capacity development programs through this maturity model right now. So we're learning from the process ourselves. And that's been a real, growth opportunity for us as an organization to really, as Nadiah mentioned, the approach to this whole process is really about internal reflective questions. And that was something that was fairly new. I know to me, I think it was new to Katy as well. That idea of, instead of just following a very linear, launch a program, goals, objectives, really to be a bit more self-reflective about whether your programs are working, whether they're, for the right audience, are we the right people to be, developing them or delivering them, and really asking those questions. And theory of change was another approach that our team brought to us that is in the documentation that you can download about the maturity model. And it really summarizes an exercise that our program managers took Katy and I through, which was really valuable. Katy, next slide. So I was not familiar with the theory of change approach to strategy. I used to a very traditional model, goals, objectives, activities, timelines, results. And, and then sort of kind of basic assessment of whether it was successful. That was what I was used to. It's what I've done my whole career from a strategy perspective. Um, but when it comes to the kind of work that we were doing in community engagement, and system change, and we were really, part of ODL's, mission is to bring about like a sea change in deep ocean exploration, and really, change the paradigm, change the dynamic for how it's being done, and who is doing the exploration, who is setting the exploration objectives. And that really demanded just a more dynamic and flexible framework. So our team took Katy and I through a theory of change exercise. It was very much a mindset shift. I would say it was fairly uncomfortable. It's a slightly different approach to really thinking through how you're strategizing. But it really forces you to ask, what conditions must change for our vision to become a reality? What roles do we and others need to play? Things, what needs to be true along the way, and are we being true to ourselves and our initiatives? And it really, we use that term a lot here, reflection, but it was really a very, reflective exercise. And so next slide, Katy. You can bring in all of them. I think there might be a couple of pieces. Yeah, there we go. And so this is just the high level structure. It's in the document. We're not going to spend too much time on it. We just encourage folks to do this work. The other thing that we found is a lot of funders were asking us for our theory of change and our theory of change work. And when we started getting those questions on grant applications, we were kind of like, so it helped us in all kinds of ways. And really, you do a lot of workshopping between these inputs, processes, outputs, outcomes, and impact, which, on the surface to me we're kind of like outputs, outcomes, impact, but there's subtle differences. They're not all the same thing. There are very subtle differences in what those things are and some of the questions here. So, and we now have not only a theory of change for Ocean Discovery League, but we have a theory of change for each one of our core initiatives. And that has been, really helpful, I think, for us. We tend to be a fairly self-reflective organization. We're small. We ask ourselves the tough questions all the time. Are we the right people for this? Are we doing the right things? But that doesn't come naturally to a lot of organizations. And so the theory of change format can really give you a template for how to have those conversations internally, and create a slightly different environment for assessment and reflection. Next slide. Yep, I think we still had some. So next steps for us, one, it's starting to put this out into the world and get feedback on it. So Katy's going to put a link to our website where you can download the full guided document of the maturity model. We are working on, this is part of our validation exercise. We're talking to some people at DOSI, some other organizations that are doing capacity work, and asking them to try it out and then give us feedback. And so we can grow the document by through the community. We're doing it ourselves, also editing it as we go, and then really going to factor that into future versions. We are also offering, facilitation services. So that's also on our website. Please reach out to us if you would like our team to help you go through an assessment or go through the maturity model together. Also, developing a theory of change. Those are things that our team is available to help facilitate if that's of interest to different groups. And I think that might be it. Yep. So here's our contact information. Katy put the website link for the maturity model. I know that was a lot to absorb, but hopefully it was really helpful and useful. And yeah, we'd love to open it up for questions.